And hey, the big prompt on the screen says we're live, and I'm apt to believe them. I'm Ani. I'm here with Teresa,
Hi.
and this is now Bridge to a Better World.
Oh, it works.
Oh, well, yes, it does. Yes.
Testing. Okay.
Ahem. Pardon us. So here we are. Believe it or not, unlikely. Just because it has been a blustery couple of days. We were pretty sure we were going to lose power last night, but we did not. We are very thankful for this and hope the trend continues. Um, and Teresa has some tin toys to share with you while I slip quietly away for just a moment.
I know you're thinking, whoop de shit, and you'd be right. Let's have a sing along instead. Deck the halls with Boston Charlie, wall wash in Kalamazoo. Nora sleeping on the trolley, squalor dollar cauliflower alligator. Let's see what comes next. Don We Now, archaic barrel. Oh boy, Louie the Lou. We wrote the rest of it. Here's some tin toys. If you're just tuning in, there will be a couple, 3 minutes of this, and then we'll get started. Hi, Russ. Looking pretty frosty out there. Little known coda to Jingle Bells. Well, at least they're flying, unlike many airlines. Oh, I should put the little clock up. Here, clocky. Oh, look at you. Look at it. You see all these pages, right? You know it's going to go on. Oh, God. Okay.
Yes. Yes, you shall. Oops. Oops. Oops, we say.
This is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa Mitchell. This is Zonnie Haynes.
Morning.
And we have things to say. We have some headlines. And I'm just going to plow right into those. Heather Cox Richardson has an email letter, and she writes, in Letters from an American, by law, the Internal Revenue Service must audit a president's tax returns. It audited President Barack Obama's taxes while he was in office and has audited President Joe Biden's taxes as well during his term. But it did not audit former President Trump's taxes for the first 2 years he was in office, and finally began an audit on the same day as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Representative Richard E. Neal, asked for information about the returns. Charlie Savage and Alan Rappaport of the New York Times reported that the IRS began to audit the tax returns Trump filed during his presidency only after he had already left office, and then assigned only one person to the job. But Michael Schmidt of the New York Times reported earlier this year, Trump repeatedly talked about using the IRS to investigate his enemies, and the Bureau did, in fact, launch invasive audits on former FBI Director James B. Comey and his deputy, Andrew G. McCabe, both of whom Trump believed to be his enemies. And it's just
Weaponizing the IRS, eh?
yeah. So and it brings up the whole thing. How many Trump traitors are in the IRS? The inquiring minds want to know. Not too loudly, lest they get audited, right? The numbers released show that Trump declared he lost money in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2020, so that he paid no income tax, and he paid a total of 1,500 measly American dollars in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017. And speaking for myself, also, it made clear that Trump's boast of being a billionaire is a lie. And by the way, Ms. Richardson did not write measly.
Well, I'm just going to say, I mean, his boast of being a billionaire is a lie, but certainly, certainly he deserves to pay more taxes than your average working Joe.
Yeah, I quite agree. I mean, if you only paid 1%, that's what, 10 million? For its part, the Senate this afternoon passed the $1.7 trillion omnibus bill to fund the government through next September 30th. Among other measures in the bill, the Senate included a reform of the Electoral Count Act to make impossible another attempt to overturn a presidential election the way Trump tried. The bill clarifies that the vice president's role in counting electoral votes is purely ceremonial, makes it clear that there is only one slate of electors per state, and increases the number of Congress members required to launch an objection to the state's electoral slate. Of course, that's just the Senate. It's not law yet, so that bears watching. And the third headline from Patrick Martin, writing in World Socialist, the massive omnibus budget bill passed by Congress and endorsed by President Joe Biden will cut social spending in real terms. While what do professional announcers do when they need to burp? I don't know. While increasing military spending and providing a further gusher of funds,
Generally, not draw extra attention to it. I don't.
For the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. Maybe like in your elbow. I don't know. The omnibus legislation passed the Senate Thursday afternoon by a 68-29 vote, with all 50 Democrats and 18 Republicans supporting it, and 29 Republicans opposed. The bill raises domestic spending by $42 billion, or 6%, and raises military spending by $76 billion, roughly 10%. The legislation accounts only for discretionary federal spending, which is subject to congressional action each year. An even larger sum goes to automatic outlays, so-called entitlements, which include Social Security and Medicare payments, other small retirement and benefit plans, and interest on the federal debt, which will rise sharply next year as the Federal Reserve raises rates. And reading that, and I know that Patrick Martin doesn't mean this, but don't forget, you paid up front for Social Security, so don't buy that entitlement crap. Yeah, you are entitled to it, but the Republicans say that like it's a bad thing.
Well, as if you could just expect a program that you've paid into your entire life and has been there for a couple of generations now to save us from, the Dickensian times that were, prior to the 40s. Just because we would feel entitled to it.
I know it's the attitude of vampires, basically. It's like, you think you're entitled for us not to be corrupt and get back what you paid in. Besides the top line numbers, Patrick writes, of $858 billion for the military and $772 billion for domestic programs, there's another $80 billion in emergency spending, more than half for Ukraine, and the remainder to fund responses to U.S. natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, and wildfires, which will be increasingly handy, won't it, since we're in a climate disaster. The White House proposal of $9 billion to fund future responses to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic was dropped. Pardon me while I pat my dog.
And of course, we don't need any additional funding for the corona pandemic, do we? It's over, I've heard, except for the fact that the hospitals are overcrowded, and hospitals in this area have been sending out emails saying, please consider wearing masks while you're inside. We can't handle the load right now. But, yeah, why would we need more money for that?
Crammed to the gills. And by the way, the budget for the CIA is secret. You don't get to know how many billions, and it is many, many billions that they get. They don't tell the lawmakers. So who rules you? I would say that the person who rules you is the person who can take your money without telling you shit about it.
Huh?
The CIA.
The CIA can take your money without telling you shit about it?
That's what they've done.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, the tax money.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm
there again.
Well, they could take your money without telling you about
Yeah,
it.
it just didn't make any
Because they
sense to
are
me. I mean, sure, they're spooks, but
Yeah. Secret police. They can do what they want.
sure.
One more headline item. This from South China Morning Post by Wang Zhengwei writes, hospitals in China are overwhelmed with patients after COVID controls were eased for the first time last month and then earlier this month. The reality could not be more starkly different. Fever medicine in short supply, hospitals and emergency services swamped, and acute blood shortage in many cities, the death toll soaring among the elderly, and morgues and funeral parlors overwhelmed with bodies. Meanwhile, the country has sent hundreds of healthcare workers, some specializing in critical care, to Beijing to ease the burden. However, the fact that outside help is needed in Beijing, which has the top medical resources in the country, highlights how fragile the healthcare system is as it faces an unprecedented COVID-19 wave following the government's change in pandemic response, the report added. Officially, the Beijing government has announced 7 deaths since opening up, and that's totally credible, isn't it? However, according to the report, the health authorities say only coronavirus patients who die from respiratory failure, not other chronic illnesses, are counted as COVID-19 deaths, and they have to apply in triplicate. I added that part. According to reports, 800 million people may get infected in China in months to come, and more than 1 million people may die. It seems like that's a reasonable estimate.
Well, and it just
maybe
sort
on
of
the low
also
side.
just sort of seems like here's another factor that will continue driving the global pandemic.
Well, yeah, and when I say I'm an anarcho-commie and a socialist, this is not what I mean. The attitude of Winnie the Pooh is it's just too much. I mean, it seems that they're having a bit of a hissy fit. They weren't able to stomp everyone back into their gigantic apartment buildings to keep the COVID pandemic from happening, so they're just going to let people cull themselves off. I think a real socialist government would have at least a third and maybe a fourth, fifth, and sixth option. They could, for example, go out to the people for once and say, we really need your cooperation because many, many, many of you are going to die, and it's going to be like this. And that's China. It's not the United States. So they don't have to worry about Fox News fucking everyone's minds up. They could have done it.
Because they've already done away with any kind of oppositional press.
there's
I'll
that.
just go ahead and, I mean, I have no love really for the government of China.
No,
this
you
is
don't.
this is something that Teresa and I might disagree on a whole lot. I don't know that she has a whole lot of love for them either, but let's just say mine is less. And the idea that we could either have a completely draconian society where people are isolated to the point of having hardships of starvation and other basic needs not being met, to, okay, gloves are off, whatever, do your own thing, you do you. There has to be middle ground, right? Like a reasonable, measured response. I keep waiting for, it's been 3 years now, almost 3 years. I keep waiting for an adult to show up in the room and actually tell people how to behave during a pandemic. Near as I can figure, that adult is the head of the WHO. He's really him and Fauci are the two people that have consistently made sense during this entire time. So that's, go ahead.
Yeah,
Back to you.
Is brilliant. He's super well educated. He's absolutely a genius. He knows that he's murdering 1 million people. He chose that policy. No one can confront him at this point. It's disgusting. And like you say, you have no love for that government. And the extent of my hedging is something on the lines of, hello, it's hard to say these things coming from a criminal imperialist country like the United States.
I have no love for our government either.
When the Chinese criticize, I know, but it's just the context. And when the Chinese criticize the United States as being a bunch of imperialist pigs, they're right.
Well, yeah,
They're
that's
absolutely
true,
correct.
but that's not what I criticize China for.
I know.
I criticize them as how they treat their people.
Yeah, and I don't want to get
And
into
then there's the genocide part, whatever.
context is one thing. I don't want to get into whataboutism. So I think we agree. The omnibus legislation.
We've been married for 28 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm ready to rant.
Yes.
I want to talk about inflation. As I've been saying the last few weeks. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if I told y'all yet. I'm doing this in my ear because I actually grew a mushroom in this ear. They plucked it out, and this ear is not working very well.
Are you? Let's continue.
And that's why I'm talking loudly, because I can't hear myself think. I'm old now. God damn it.
It's true. We spent the solstice with friends, wherein all of us talked about our medical issues. So this is it. We have become our grandparents.
Yep.
We gather with friends for a nice evening of celebration and talk about our lumbago. All right, carry
When
on.
you're a toddler, you see other toddlers, and you're like, oh, I can play with this person. They understand my situation. We both
We
live
have
under the
common life
table.
experience. We live in under
Right.
the table.
And then when you're
world.
old, it comes back. It's like, oh, there's an old person, And so I'm standing in the post office line with other old people, and I'm like, yeah, I remember back when. And I don't think I can stand this long either, and stuff like this, And it's just a stretch from there to like, what surgeries have you had lately? I had a great bowel movement the other day. How about you?
Oh my holy gods. Okay, carry on.
I worked hard to get here.
Get off my lawn, indeed, John.
So I'll just be old.
This is hard for a riot girl to admit.
Yep. Yeah, weren't we supposed to be in the 21st century where they cured old age by this point?
No, I'm a Gen Xer. I never expected to live to the 21st century.
Where the fuck is my personal helicopter? But so inflation. When the Fed,
Topic at
I've been
hand.
saying this in the past few weeks, when the Fed talks about inflation, they mean they can't stand it that you're making good wages. Of course, you're not making good wages. You're making the worst wages fucking ever. The distribution of wages in this country is absolutely the worst ever. And, I could rant about that, but I'm going to take it from this angle, which is that the omnibus legislation passed the Senate. Whoops, that's the wrong rant. That's the headlines. I'm going to use Heather Gutney's, the UN envoy. Okay, I'm just not going to go there. I'm going to use Heather Gutney's article in these times as a template for remarks on the Federal Reserve. If you pull up Federal Reserve on Wikipedia, you'll get a fair amount of schoolboy cant about how the Reserve was created in 1913 to smooth out public and private debt and provide a national pool of money for emergencies. But maybe you've heard me rant lately about how the Reserve is attacking the working class by restricting the availability of lending. Both things are true. The Reserve was put in place just before the First World War with just such ideals in mind until the whole process was hijacked by the rich. They got right on it. William Jennings Bryan wanted to have a publicly controlled central bank, but the bankers controlled Congress just as badly then as they do today. And whereas Congress gets to rubber stamp the choices, it is private banks that select the governors of the Fed. The Fed governor for San Francisco region, which includes Oregon, is probably the only exception to those governors. She actually, her dad was a post office worker, and her family divorced, and she grew up poor. And I don't know what her attitude is. I wasn't able to find that this morning as I was digging around. But if she has a different attitude, then she's probably the only one. I mean, they are all rich. I think technical term is motherfuckers. Would you like to see the GAO audit the Fed to see just what they were thinking while deliberately creating an anti-working class recession? Sure you would, but you're not gonna, because those 1913 bankers prohibited just that. The latest scam of big money is private equity buyouts, a continuation of the leveraged buyouts of the 80s that perhaps you had thought was now illegal or at least regulated after the Wolf of Wall Street and all that kind of thing. Well, it's not. It has metastasized instead into forms like add a syllable, into firms like BlackRock, which controls more than $10 trillion. Yeah, it was a T, $10 trillion in assets. I'm going to say that in the Amy Goodman way. $10 trillion in assets.
You have
and
to
is
actually
directly,
emphasize the T.
I should wear one of those cool jackets too. And is directly responsible for the pinch penny Dickensian wage structure that has devastated most American workers' lives, and particularly that of millennials and Gen Z. from Gottney's writing, quote, today, the top 100th of 1% of the wealthiest people in America hold more of the country's total wealth than that same group did during the Gilded Age, a time of unrestrained financial speculation, but also of grinding poverty, corruption, and racial strife.
And again, we're talking the Dickensian times,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Gilded Age,
Yeah,
the
extended
robber
bit.
barons.
Yep. Little match boy. That extreme concentration
It's
of
Little
wealth.
Match Girl, actually.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. In large part attributable to the dominance of Wall Street over American life, and bankers and investors' willingness to manufacture and exploit crises when the spoils are greatest. The centrality of finance in the United States and across the globe arose through successive waves of neoliberal reform over the last half century, involving the privatization of profits and externalization of risk. Don't you love externalization? That means you pay for it. The 2007 financial crisis led to widespread distrust of banks and government, but rather than creating a fair economic system, it gave rise to new trends in finance that expanded speculators' influence in the global economy and continued to facilitate massive accumulations of wealth. Since the crisis, the financial sector has witnessed the rise of private equity, also the price of Reichwood equity, or PE, as a major league wealth maker, such that founders of the largest PE firms, private equity firms, have become multi-billionaires, mere millions. What am I saying? In 2021, 25 members of the Forbes billionaire list made their money in PE. Notably, Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts, known as KKR, and that's the founder Henry Kravis, who's worth $7.4 billion, and Steven Schwartzman, who's worth around $30 billion. The co-founder of the PE giant Blackstone, which manages about $1 trillion. That's out of date. $10 trillion, a mammoth sum. Excuse me, maybe I'll burp some too. PE is a rebranded form of still alive, damn it, of the leveraged buyouts, the LBOs of the Reagan era. Memorialized in Oliver Stone's Oscar-winning film Wall Street, a fictionalized account of how real-life banker predators like Ivan Boesky speculated on corporate takeovers in the go-go 1980s, using illegal insider information justified with survival of the fittest ideologies and slogans like greed is good. In that dog-eat-dog world of risk arbitrage, insider information was both money and power. The racket involved buying stock in target companies, pushing up bids beyond their actual value, and forcing takeovers. It's not high-stakes gambling, it's arbitrage.
There you go.
Anytime you got that in there, it's a high.
Then it's fancy.
Yeah. Companies acquired through leverage buyouts are more likely to lower wages, cut retirement plans, and have higher rates of bankruptcy. Instead of reinvesting profits, as someone trying to build a company would, PE strips them of workers and assets and saddles them with untenable debt repayment schedules to discipline managers. Such was the case with dozens of large retailers that PE firms drove into the ground, including the otherwise profitable Toys R Us, wiping out millions of jobs, shorting workers of their severance pay, and cutting down the supply of toys. I miss Toys R Us. They had microscopes. At the head of the Fed, why should I grow up either? At the head of the Fed,
No reason.
we have Jerome Powell, a grandson of a major law school dean, a multimillionaire resident of Chevy Chase, born with a silver spoon up his ass, appointed by Donald J. Trump. Trump was unhappy with him as he was unhelpful in economic aggression versus China. President Biden had a chance to get rid of him, and if he had objections, must have decided to retreat because he's still there. According to Wikipedia, during the worst of the pandemic, Powell, quote, accepted asset price inflation as a consequence of Fed policy actions. Powell was criticized for using high levels of direct and indirect quantitative easing, that's giving multi-billions of dollars away to billionaires, as valuations hit levels last seen at the peaks of previous bubbles. The Fed's acceptance of asset price inflation from 2019 onwards resulted in levels of wealth inequality not seen in the United States since the 1920s. Fed asset purchases were also seen as contributing to the K-shaped recovery that emerged during the coronavirus pandemic, where the asset bubbles protected the wealthier segments of society from the financial effects of the pandemic at the expense of most other segments, and particularly on the younger non-asset owning segments, such as millennials, or in other words, the working class.
K-shaped recovery?
I didn't look that up. I have no idea what they're talking
I mean,
about.
okay, so it's like
on a
there's a
graph,
protection
yeah.
up here, but down here
Yeah.
you get. I can't quite. Okay.
If you follow the graph really carefully, you can see that it spells out "you are fucked,"
Which does have a K in it.
It does. Edward Luce, the Financial Times, warned that the Fed's use of asset purchases, excuse me, and the resultant widening of wealth inequality could lead to political and social instability in the United States, saying, quote, the majority of people are suffering amid a great Gatsby-style boom at the top. And you can bet that quote did not appear on Fox News or OAN or Newsmax. Powell's expansion of credit through repo contracts, that's repurchase contracts, seen as a new Greenspan put, but that's too technical. I'm going to skip that. Powell defended his actions saying, I don't know, this is a quote, I don't know that the connection between asset purchases and financial stability is a particularly tight one, which is his way of saying, nuh-uh. And he wasn't worried that the Fed's actions were creating asset bubbles. It's hard to see the financial pain of workers from Chevy Chase Village. Chevy Chase Village is where you go when you want to live in a 95% white enclave away from the squalor of Chevy Chase. So my point here is that if you think the rich have it in for you,
They do.
you're right. The real question is, what are their ways and means? The lack of transparency for our oligarchs is essential to their uncontested rule. Add to that the distraction and deception of Fox News style propaganda, and you have the rapidly disintegrating social conditions that we face today, even as financial collapse looms and the climate goes berserk. It's not a problem for the bunker owning class.
Well, and I want to say that I'm really thrilled that against this backdrop, there is an awakening or a reinvigoration of workers organizing. And we are seeing that actually at a rate that we hadn't seen for 30, 40 years, over 40 years. And that's actually, what helped to turn things around in the days of the robber barons, although it was really, really ugly, right? And workers were massacred. And we can see that in many examples.
Yeah, we're massacring them right now out in the streets.
But
people are dying from that cold.
Yeah, I was going to say, in this case, the massacres come in terms of the increased deaths and early deaths that poverty brings. So far, we don't have troops in the streets trying to kill people who are striking.
No, we just got corpses in the street.
Yeah, but in the robber baron times, we did too.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my point. Carry
And a
on.
final one as well.
I
There's
don't
nothing further to carry on.
Oh, okay.
I have ranted my rants. Thank you for listening to that. Now I want to see what people put in the
Okay,
the
so
comments.
I'm gonna, honey,
I love comments.
they're right here.
I know, but I
Okay,
have to-
so
I have to
anyways,
do like this to see them here.
yeah, don't
Look
do that.
through my- okay, so I'm gonna look. In
Yeah,
here.
okay. So I'm just gonna maybe then continue on with the area of the show that I'll be doing.
It's weird.
I'm so sorry. So
Hi, John.
Teresa, my love.
Regulations for the floor. That's
Stop.
right.
I want to talk about solstice.
Okay, please do that.
And we'll refocus here. Solstice itself was on Wednesday, as the sun hit Capricorn at 1:40 something or other in the afternoon here in the Portland area. And that means that that's the point that the Earth starts to tilt the other direction, right? Creating increase of sun and light in the northern hemisphere and decrease of sun and light in the southern hemisphere. So the wobble happened on Wednesday. And that is the start of our new year as pagans. And so as we look forward into that new year, this is also, I have to say, sort of a significant night because this is the new moon that is so very close to the solstice. So I feel like this is, in fact, one of the darkest nights of the year. And if you are given to, meditation, if you're given to looking within, then this is a good night to be doing that. And you can do that very simply. You can do it just meditating with a candle if you would like. You can try some divination. You can just sit quietly with your thoughts. You can journal about, and the focus really here is all of the things that you have in your life, giving some thanks. Thinking about what it is that you no longer want to carry with you, what you want to leave behind in the old year, and what it is that you are open to, what it is you are trying to draw to your life in this new year. To have the clear vision come tonight, or over the last couple of nights, this is the time that is the most beneficial to gain clarity with those visions of what you want to leave behind, what you want to increase going forward. And then we can also talk about as you want to see it increasing, to really put intention that direction after tonight, because we have both the renewal of the solar year and the renewal of the moon cycle. And so it's an incredibly rich time to do some manifestation magic. And, for those that celebrate Christmas, that's kind of the magic of Christmas too, right? What goodness can we bring in and share with each other? And I really think that our key is sharing, because I am an anarcho commie. And I think that sharing really does work best. So, all that said, here's the tarot reading I got for the day. And what we have here. It's the kitty cards again. Yes, we have the Five of Cups inversed, or the Five of Bowls inversed in this deck. We have the Page of Swords inversed, and we have the Six of Bowls, as we say, right side up. What does this all mean? It means that you have probably been having some struggles, and really, it's kind of a safe bet, right? Who hasn't been having some struggles recently? But the good news is that we can, in fact, look forward to better times ahead. And that we can, in fact, bridge to a better world, right? And it's both in outer circumstances coming to us, but it's also a lot about our own attitudes and looking for good opportunities to increase the joy of our relationships, increase the abundance of heartfelt connections, and to look for opportunities to mend fences and to move on from sort of that old "this hasn't been working" sort of feeling. But as we do it, don't jump prematurely. Really check out what you are doing, because as we're sort of coming out of a dark time, coming out of a challenging time, and opening to new experiences, sometimes we just sort of jump at everything, and we can exhaust ourselves. So be careful with your resources. Um, it is good to be open. It is good to know that there are opportunities, but it's also important to use a little analysis to fathom out which ones are really worth pursuing, and which ones need to be left behind, perhaps in the old year. So, um, a little intellectual analysis is good. Don't, yeah, don't jump at shadows is just the phrase that just keeps coming to my mind there. And then finally, what we have in the Six of Cups is this is a very nostalgic time for a whole lot of people, right? And I think that that's true of this holiday season in general. Um, whatever holiday we may have grown up celebrating, chances are good we have a lot of nostalgia attached to this time of year. Um, and we have an opportunity now to sort of reconnect with that younger self, and also to make sure that we are sharing good, important, heartfelt energy, love, with the younger folks in our lives, that we are being good role models, that we are being good, um, that we're being good family, and that we are inviting those with less lived experience, the youngers, into that experience, and nurturing them and helping them grow in ways that are good and healthy and positive. And so that's what I have. We've, congratulate yourselves for coming through the darkest times, the most challenging times of this year. Looking forward to those new opportunities that are there, building the bridges that we need to reinforce with each other, so that we can, in fact, support each other, nurture each other, and look for opportunities that really make sense, that are good investments for our hearts and for our minds. Don't worry excessively about stuff you can't do anything about. Find the ways that you can impact change. It's important not to spin your wheels because none of us have that much energy, right? So focus where you can do the best, where you can bring in the most reciprocated heart energy, and go there in this last week of the Gregorian calendar 2022.
You're a Gregorian.
Sure, a Gregorian. All right, so I think that's what I have. Happy solstice, happy Yuletide, and happy Hanukkah, happy
Io
Christmas,
Saturnalia.
happy
Ave
all
Solis
that,
Invictus.
and
Bon Yule.
a good Kwanzaa to y'all too.
Yep. And all
So-
the ships at sea.
Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back next week, God us willing, and the creek don't rise.
See ya.